Ladies, it is 1 o'clock on my clock, so that means it is showtime. We ready to get this party started?
Yes.
Always.
All right, here we go. Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are so glad you are here with us, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, we continue our celebration of Women's History Month by featuring two very talented women who've worn several different hats in international music business roles and have done so with grace and achieved amazing results every step of the way. Before we get started, let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people in the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And please ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the interview. Also, please make sure that your chat is set to address speakers and attendees, not just the speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors without their support, we could not keep this free. I want to thank First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, Four Roses Bourbon, the Fairlane Hotel, Lightning 100, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Project Music, Jive Printing, Moo TV, Tennessee Brew Works, and KM Relief, which is a brand of CBD products. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome back my good friend and smartest people alumnus, Vickie Nauman. Vickie has deep experience in the intersection of music and technology, focusing her business on rights, licensing, products and experiences, and strategic business development. She founded the boutique consulting and advisory firm Cross Border Works and has a portfolio of forward-thinking companies from large enterprise to early-stage startups. Her work spans music, legislation, thought leadership, the entire stack of music tech, product management, music finance, partnerships, and being a subject matter expert, giving her a unique perspective on the ever-changing global landscape. As a digital music pioneer, Vickie worked on licensing and product for one of the first legal digital services, MusicNet, back in 2001. She led strategic partnerships for connected device manufacturer Sonos, started and ran U.S. business for global music platform 7 Digital, and did digital business in Europe and China as a consultant. In addition, she built one of the first DMCA compliant services at taste-making station KEXP in Seattle. Prior to 2001, she ran marketing programs and produced live broadcasts in traditional radio in the NPR network, and started out her long career with Procter & Gamble. And joining Vickie today as our featured guest is Dani Deahl. As a prominent figure in music, Dani has been at the forefront of artist discovery and meaningful industry change for over a decade. She currently is editorial director at Output. She's a DJ, a producer, and a public speaker. She developed the coverage of the intersection of music and technology for The Verge, helmed YouTube series The Future of Music, and is vice president for the Recording Academy Chicago chapter. When performing, she blends trap and house to create bass-forward sets that are technically savvy and high energy. As an artist herself, Dani has released trap, twerk, and hard-hitting house with labels like Dim Mak, Monster Cat, Flamingo, CR2, and Armada. She's also been the subject of 2 documentaries, toured extensively across the globe, played festivals like Spring Awakening, Lollapalooza, and EDC, venues like Wrigley Field with Fall Out Boy, hosted her own terrestrial radio show in Spain and the Canary Islands, and has been an official Red Bull DJ. She's headlined with or been direct support for artists like Alice in Wonderland, Valentino, Khan, Cruella, Diplo, Steve Aoki, Nervo, Yellow Claw, and countless others. Dani has previously held positions with Nylon Magazine and DJ Mag. She's also a prominent expert on the topics of gender equality in music and marketing for musicians, with speaking engagements at TEDx, Spotify for Artists, Medem, Mondo New York, and dozens of other high-profile industry outlets and conferences. In 2020, she partnered with Bands in Town and Twitter to launch Net.work, a Twitch festival dedicated to underrepresented acts in dance. Additionally, she's been a guest and expert voice for MSNBC and on podcasts like Reset, Vergecast, Switched on Pop, Ari's Take, and more. She's not only consulted on creative branding initiatives for labels and artists, but has been instrumental in breaking new artists like Valentino Khan and Louis the Child. In fact, she has a history of doing so, credited with being the first to tap acts to watch such as the Chainsmokers, the Knocks, Dylan Francis, and Flostradamus. As of 2018, Dani is also an elected vice president of the Recording Academy, engaged in outreach and professional development for the dance community. Please welcome these two amazing rock stars to the smartest people in the room. Take it away, Vickie.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. And salute to you and everybody else in Nashville that had a very, very wet weekend. Sorry about that. We'd like some of that rain in California. Dani, thank you so much for doing this. And it's a pleasure to talk with you. I think we met, I don't know, I think it was in Nashville at Music Biz a few years ago when you were writing for The Verge. And what we'd like to do today is kind of go into a little bit about your background, and you know, I always feel like there's always little decisions and nuggets of life in early stages that get us on the path to where we are today. So tell me a little bit about you. So you born and bred in Chicago, and it sounds like you also had a pretty creative youth.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting. There aren't a lot of us that are born and bred in Chicago and still live in Chicago. We tend to migrate to New York or Los Angeles, or even Denver. I think I've always stayed, one, because I love the rich artistic community and history that we have in the city. And two, I was so used to traveling all the dang time. And so I never felt like I was stuck in any one location. The past year certainly changed that. I've not been on a plane, but I still love my city. And I think that we breed some of the best artists. Did you have anything specific that you wanted to go off of from that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're a writer and you're a musician, you're a DJ. So, and you also told me a story about your gender neutral household when you grew up. And so yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, this pretty progressive at the time. Probably actually would still be seen as pretty progressive, but my parents intentionally raised me in a gender neutral household to the best of their abilities. And that meant things like my brother and I having bedrooms that were painted green and yellow instead of pink and blue. I wasn't allowed to have Barbie unless Barbie had a career. So I had a Barbie, but it was Dr. Barbie. So that was allowed in my house. Most of the toys that we grew up with were things that were gender neutral, that allowed us to build things, Lego, Tinker Toys, Lincoln Logs, things like that. And the reason why they gave me the name Danielle was because the nickname Dani was androgynous. And so therefore, as I grew up, depending on how my personality shook out, I could choose the version of the name that was seen as more traditionally feminine in the Western sense, Danielle, or I could choose to be Dani.
And you chose Dani.
I am only Danielle when I am in trouble.
Exactly. Well, and you started out your journalism career really doing a lot of groundbreaking work, you know, in this intersection of music and tech. You were at Nylon. You've done freelance writing for lots and lots of different publications and The Verge, and now you've recently become editorial director at Output. So
Mhm.
what is it that you like to write about? What drives you in picking your topics and pulling apart information for your readers?
I think fundamentally what has always interested me is the idea of demystifying the music industry. I think there are so few writers out there that have the vocabulary and the know-how to be able to tackle aspects of the industry that are very complicated, make them digestible and easy to understand. Music is a very nebulous industry to operate in. There isn't a simple guidebook. Maybe Ari's website, Ari's Take might be the closest thing that we have to that. Uh, but there are plenty of people out there who operate as musicians but do not know anything about the business that they operate in. They only know about the creative side. And I think that my history being an artist and someone who is a journalist has really aided me in achieving that goal of delivering transparency, because I am able to understand the topic from both sides of the coin, which is something that most people don't have under their belt.
Yeah, it's every time I hear myself explaining the industry to people who are even 1 or 2 degrees outside of it, it's almost like an out of body experience where I feel like, wow, I sound crazy. If people don't know me, they would think that I'm making this up. But artists have to be entrepreneurs now and sole proprietors for early stage artists, and so you have to understand the business and the landscape you're operating in.
I would push back and say that artists always had to be entrepreneurs. They always had to. And we're seeing the repercussions of that now with the older generation, when they did not understand that they had to be entrepreneurs, when suddenly they don't have ownership of their catalog anymore, right? They don't own the rights to the things that they made. They were victims of bad deals. Um, Artists have always had to be entrepreneurs and understand the business. Now it is at the forefront of the conversation and appears to be more imperative. And that's because there's this democratization with people being able to enter the industry without the aid of being signed to a major label.
Yeah, you're right. It has evolved, and artists have always had to be entrepreneurial. But I think now artists have the tools to really do that effectively without having to rely on big entities to release their music. Tell me a little bit about what you're writing about at Output. Is there a music tech focus to this?
Yeah, there is a music tech focus to it. There's also a very strong cultural component, which I think is something that separates us from other music tech companies. Fundamentally, Output is a different space in music tech because the majority of the people that work at Output, from the CEO down to customer support, are musicians. Our founder was a composer. That's how he got his start, scoring for films like Avatar under Hans Zimmer. And that makes it a place where we value 360 the creative process and the people that make up the space that we operate in. So there is a contingency of coverage that does have to do around music tech, but there's also the space to pay attention to cultural and social topics that affect musicians. For example, we just published today a guide on 8 resources for the Asian American Pacific Islander music community to go and get free mental health help. And that's something that obviously speaks very directly to our community as musicians, and also awareness of other people that exist in the space that don't look like us, and giving them a voice.
Yeah. Well, the music industry looks really different when you look at it from an artist's perspective, because if you look at it from an industry perspective, you see, artists are, signed to labels or distributors. That gets into the supply chain. Composers get in, that gets into the supply chain. Then there's all the big DSPs and the services. But if you look at it from an artist standpoint and you say, I'm a creator, I have songs that I've performed and songs that I've written, and now it's this explosion of different platforms and usage, and you're trying to make sense of all the data. And I do feel like there's a need in the market for people to write for that perspective, because from an artist standpoint, it's not as important necessarily what's in that supply chain from your core metadata and identifiers. You just need to know to choose the right partner that's going to take care of that.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I think part of understanding the business that you operate in is knowing your own limitations and knowing when to outsource work. My brother, for example, is a tremendous producer, but his brain does not really have the capacity to understand distribution or how to monetize his own music or create a marketing strategy. He's like, well, I just finished the track. I'm just going to throw it up on SoundCloud. And I'm like, you are exactly the type of person that should be signed to a label. You need somebody, a partner, to help you through this. Yeah, understanding the business that you operate in doesn't mean that you have to handle all aspects, but you should be able to understand the results that you get and be able to troubleshoot and add or subtract your team accordingly.
Right. And I don't think that in the same way that we don't need to understand exactly how Visa and MasterCard make money and process our transactions, and even having our credit card numbers memorized. Like, we just need to know that it works, and we need to know. And it's the same thing with artists is, you have different needs at different stages of your career, and the partners and the team that you have around you are probably going to evolve over that time period.
And I think most people anticipate that they need a team much earlier than they do. That's a question that I get a lot is, when do I need a manager? When do I need a booking agent? And I'm like, well, if you can handle these things yourself and you're not overwhelmed, then that's an artificial need that you've created for yourself, and you're fine solo. I actually think the most important person that somebody should add to their team early stage is an attorney. If you can figure out, even working with a free entity like Lawyers for the Creative Arts, I think you only have to pay $50 per contract, and then everything is pro bono, or finding an entertainment attorney where you give them a small percentage of every item or contract that they review for you. For me, I think that if you're going to talk about adding to your team, that's where I would start.
Yeah. Well, and I also feel like, in any contracts, there's probably 5 deal points that are really, really important to look at. And whether it's your manager or a label or a publisher, and artists should be armed with that, and then have someone who's an expert that can help on all of the different bits and pieces. So you've been a DJ, and so you're not only speaking this from an industry and informed source, but you've learned this. And so 10 years, is that correct? You were a full-time DJ?
Yeah, 10 years. I lived the hustle and was a full-time touring DJ, late nights, early flights, the whole deal, traveled everywhere, only saw the airport, the hotel, and the venue. But I love it. I love every part of it. I love performing. I can't wait to get back to it. I've turned down everything over the past year. It's been a full year since I've played my last event in person at this point. But yeah, DJing will always be a core component of who I am. It's why I fell in love with dance music to begin with, and was a big part of the trajectory with my career over the span of my life.
When you say you've turned down everything in the last year, is that because you were being invited to DJ in-person events while we're in the middle of a pandemic, or other reasons?
Yes, and specifically for that reason. And a lot of my friends who are DJs, we all were hit with the same realization, which is, oh my gosh, the majority of our money comes from live gigs. Now what? And I, at the time, had the luxury of also working for Verge. So if I wasn't scraping for pennies the way a lot of my other friends were, but at the middle of the year, the pandemic hit Vox Media, and so I was then in the same boat as everyone else and trying to figure out next moves and what I could possibly do in the absence of having every single live event and live piece of work taken away from me. It was, I just never could have predicted that things would have changed so drastically. And as hard as it was to turn down everything, for me, it was the right choice. The first live event that I have booked is September for North Coast Music Festival. And that is pending on things being safe at that time. But that's the closest date that I'm willing to look at. And it will have been 18 months since my last live event when that date rolls around.
And you've been doing things on Twitch and, on different live stream platforms, but it's really, there's no after party. There's no after party.
No, it's completely different. I will say, if there's something that Twitch has taught me, it's really centered by my thoughts about the 1,000 true fans theory. Twitch really shows that you can hone in on a smaller community of super fans and have those people show up week after week. And those are the reliable people that are always going to be there for your gigs, that are going to purchase subscriptions, that are going to buy your merch. And it's a different experience in some ways that I think are net negative, but there are parts of the experience I think are a net positive. And that net positive is that sense of community, the fact that people show up and I recognize their usernames and I know the name of their girlfriend or their pets and what's going on in their life. And they've started to become friends with each other because they show up every week and talk and chat. That's a really different sense of community for me that I did not know beforehand when I was playing in clubs. So I hope to have that continue.
I do think there's been a paradigm shift for a lot of artists that also have realized that while any events, live streaming online is it's not able to replace the feeling when you're in a room and it's full of people and the electricity and you're just so excited to see the band go on and artists are so excited to play. But even if you do a 50-city tour, you're still not going to reach most of your fans. And so live streaming has enabled people to reach a global audience that's been developed through Spotify and Apple Music and streaming platforms. But it's a different kind of community. And I think you have to nurture that over time.
Yeah, it also allows for a more casual kind of interaction as well. When you go and see somebody live at a show, I think there's an expectation of things not being perfect, but there is a very high level degree of execution because things have been rehearsed over and over again. And meanwhile, with Twitch, the adage is even if you've done everything right, something is going to screw up. Usually does every week, but I think that fosters a sense of closeness between yourself and the people that are watching you. It really makes you appear more human. If I press the wrong button and then the wrong frames show up on screen, or one time I was DJing and I had a short that was specific to one half of my room, which only affected my DJ gear. So the stream was still live because my laptop was plugged in on the other side of the room, but then all of a sudden the music just went away and I had to troubleshoot that live on stream. And those things wind up becoming happy accidents instead of oh no moments, which is interesting.
Right. So we're going to talk a bit about being a woman in the industry, but I wanted to kind of open that conversation with you around DJing because, the electronic music culture and DJ culture it always seems to be very traditionally male. I remember I remember the first time I was at a festival and there were women DJing, and I was like, oh, thank you. You know, it was awesome to see women on stage. What is that like?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a very big Pandora's box kind of question. It's one I've had to contend with and think about for the majority of my life. I think I wasn't aware of the depths of the issue when I was starting out as a DJ because I grew up in Chicago. And in Chicago, I had groups like Super Jane. If there are any DJs that are watching, you 100% know who Super Jane is. It's a collective of 4 amazing women DJs with Colette and Heather and some others. And so I had women that were active and big names in Chicago that I could look up to as peers. And that was not normal, but I didn't know that that wasn't normal. Now, as time has went on and I became a bigger, shout out Tech Life, yes, we got some Chicago folks in the house. As I became bigger and started to tour, those disparities became more clear to me because then I was in other places that did not have women that were DJing all of the time. And I really think that it's only been in the past few years that I've been able to reflect on a lot of the experiences that I went through as a touring DJ and recognize those microaggressions that happened when I was on the road, and even flat out assault that happened on the road, behaviors that I would excuse because I just thought it was a part of what you had to go through in the industry. It's amazing how we normalize bad behaviors when we encounter them over and over again, simply because we don't have anyone else around us to tell us that it shouldn't happen.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I feel like, you know, a few years ago when all of the stories just was like an avalanche of Me Too stories that poured out, that I found myself thinking, oh my God, all of these years I have been telling myself that it's only me and that somehow I'm the one that's causing, you know, bad men to behave badly to me. And I completely bought that it was my fault. And then I realized once all the stories came out, it's like, oh, this is ridiculous. This has been happening to millions and millions of women in every industry and every permutation of, you know, social and professional working environments. And I had completely just normalized it. And I think in electronic music and DJ culture, you know, a lot of this is just a really, really long time coming. And I have to think that, you know, part of you seeing the women, you know, DJ collective of Super Jane on stage, that it became something that you expected to be normal. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of women don't see that. And so they don't think that they can be on stage.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. I remember having an email dialogue. I've looked for this email for ages. I can't find it. I was emailing back and forth with the editor-in-chief of a very prominent dance music blog, and he very specifically told me that women go to festivals and they see women dancing as go-go's, and so that's what they aspire to look pretty and to craft pretty outfits. And men go to festivals and they look at the men DJing on stage and they think, that's amazing, that guy's controlling the audience, I want to be like him. And I was really shell shocked at how he couldn't look at his own language in print and see how we had basically created a construct that was self-fulfilling. And it did not have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way.
No, but I think it takes like the first step is awareness. And I see this even in like industry panels, where it used to be that I was always the only woman on any technology based panel. And then I realized when I was putting my own panels together that I would invite all men. And then I would say, oh, wait a minute, I'm doing the same thing where I'm not going that little bit extra step and to say, yes, I know all these men and they're great and they've all been on panels and they're very accomplished, but maybe I need to look a little further and I need to find the women that I know are smart, know their shit, but they
Mm-hmm.
may not be as seasoned being on panels, and pull them up on stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really interesting when there's this pushback. The one of the most common responses that you hear when you ask people to diversify panels, diversify lineups is, well, there aren't enough women, POC, whatever the group is, participating, and we don't know where to find them. They're not going to sell tickets. So what are we supposed to do? And that is flat out just the biggest cop out I have ever heard, because this genre comes from all of those marginalized communities. They make up a significant portion of the industry. They are there. If you say that you can't find them, you are just lazy or you're obtuse. That's it. The festival that Tom mentioned that I did last year, Network, I did in partnership with Bands in Town and Twitter. And the whole point for that was to showcase all of these marginalized communities on a single lineup. I was really fed up with the fact that we had transitioned into this digital space because of quarantine, where ostensibly you could book anyone you wanted with no repercussion because it was the Wild West for all of us. And yet big promoters were still booking the same 30 straight white dudes that would have gotten those slots at the regular IRL circuit every single week. So I told Bands in Town I wanted to do something different. They were wholly on board. And we had people like Kittens and Candy. We were talking Nervo at some the whole lineup. Cruella was all women, persons of color, and LGBTQ artists, and that festival outperformed every other competing festival that was happening at the same time on Twitch. So
It's great.
It was a really good IRL example of a live buster.
Yeah. Well, I think it also, especially, both an artistic and like a technology, like if you have, it's undeniable that the lenses that we see in the world are shaped by who we are, by what we look like, by what our life experience is, by the many, many nuances of how we've navigated the world. And if you have a bunch of white guys around a table, in the same way, if you had a bunch of white women from similar perspectives, you're not going to have the benefit of what are of mixed perspectives on our society. So I feel like you get better thinking, you get better product ideas, you get better artistic ideas when you have a blend and you have a mix, because it challenges you, it challenges your perspective, it challenges your assumptions, and I think that it is exactly what, as you say, it's like you just have to put a little bit more effort in and think about that in the makeup of your group.
Yeah, absolutely, because there are struggles that are unique to each group of people that they face that you might not know about otherwise if you weren't able to have that conversation or be exposed to those folks. I mean, even putting up the article that I mentioned earlier, the mental health resources for Asian American Pacific Islanders on Output was really important, because a lot of people don't understand that there are mental health issues that are specific to the AAPI community, dealing with the model minority myth, for example, stigmas, cultural stigmas around mental health, et cetera. There are always things that you can learn when you put yourself in a conversation with people that have a different life experience than you and you're willing to listen.
So you and I are both on this notorious FA list, which is a huge listserv of thousands and thousands. I don't even know how many, probably 10,000 people in the industry. And there's a really short list of people who post. It's got a very, for for people who are not on this list, it's got a really wide range of opinions about everything from legal issues to society. And I've kicked the hornet's nest a few times when I felt like things veered into toxicity or just backwards thinking.
Mhm.
And I've noticed that you have also poked the bear as well. But how do you decide which battles to fight?
Mhm.
Because we come across this daily.
Right. And oftentimes you find yourself too tired to take on another battle, right?
Right, exactly.
Yes. I do want to address before I get to that, somebody brought up, what about music purchasing patterns? Who
Mm,
buys the music? Uh, Very interesting. A couple years ago, I noticed when Lollapalooza released their lineup, there were a significant amount of women that were on the bill. And so I went to the website and I counted one by one how many acts had at least one woman member in them. It was a 50-50 split, which I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So I tweeted about it. And then somebody from C3 tweeted back at me and verified that it was intentional on their part, but they weren't going to publicly call it out. And I was like, good on you. That's exactly what needs to be done. So in terms of the fall list and when I choose to pick my battles, I think it's like you, when things become so obviously toxic and no one is raising their voice. The fall list in particular, I'm more comfortable with raising my voice because these are all people that ostensibly have a platform to speak upon. So they should know better. There's a difference to me between going after a random on Twitter that has no platform and 5 followers versus talking to an executive who should know better and is saying a very bad opinion in front of other executives. Those are the battles that I choose to pick because uh, they're in positions of power. I think the people that are in positions of power that have decision-making abilities are always the ones that need to be put to task first, because they are the ones that have the ability to send out messages that can change the tide. They have the ability to hire people that look different than them. They have the ability to interject in conversations in the future if they learn anything from being made an example of. So it's the bigger fish that I choose to fry.
Yeah. Well, and I also feel like every time that I have kicked that hornet's nest, I always am like, oh, I hit send, and I'm like, ah, I probably shouldn't have said that. Now I've gotten myself into into the fray. But I always get messages from women and men who write to me off the list and say thank you, I didn't want to say that because I just don't want to put myself out there. But I do feel like there's almost every situation that I've ever been in where it started to feel dangerous or that
Mhm.
someone was almost predatory. It's almost always been retaliation.
Mhm.
And it's been retaliation of, when I was younger, lots of, like inappropriate sexual things. And then as I've gotten
Mhm.
older, it's retaliation because I didn't seed, you know, mountains um, of impressive comments about someone, or I wasn't adequately obsequious.
Mhm.
And I feel like there is some safety in putting things out publicly, because I feel like, yeah, okay, you know this is how I see it, you've said how you see it. And but when do you feel like it's okay to take that risk, or do you even worry about it anymore?
I don't worry about it anymore. I stopped worrying about it a while ago. There was probably a period of time, maybe 5 to 7 years ago, when I was still DJing pretty full time, and uh, had some concerns about maybe getting locked out of some gigs where I would watch my words, but I was still described as a woman that men felt they had to walk on eggshells around, which I take as a compliment. I love that. And I've now graduated from that into full-blown apologies for the swear, but I gave out my last fuck a very long time ago, and it's very freeing when you get to that stage. And if there's one wish that I have, it's that those things that you're talking about, the validations, the thank yous, the agreements, if those would be brought into the public arena and not side-channed. I think it is more useful for the community as a whole if somebody says something that is quote unquote poking the hornet's nest and they agree with it, to voice that agreement publicly in the thread in front of the community, rather than silently going and saying, oh, I was too scared to say it, but thank you for putting your neck on the line.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it is for the same reason that when you saw Super Jane and you thought, oh, well, look at them, they're on stage, I can do that too. It's the same thing about speaking out and letting younger women or people that are more shy, and letting them know that it is okay to speak out, because for years we didn't, or we went,
Yes.
we did things like we went to HR, only to find out that HR isn't going to help,
Oh, see,
HR.
like I never had that. I never had that. The output, this is the first company where I'm like, oh, we have someone that's called head of people, and I can actually ask him for advice or to fix things. Like, I'm so used to fending for myself that to know that there is any sort of resource is kind of mind blowing to me. Dani, how did you stop worrying about it? I stopped worrying about it honestly because I achieved a position of relative power in my lane in my industry, where people sat up and paid attention whenever I spoke. It was having a platform, and it was having power that gave me the ability to not care. And so I realized that there are people who are starting out, who are indie musicians who have a lot to risk and lose, that don't feel as comfortable speaking up at this point in time, even if they might be experiencing really bad actions. And I can't fault someone for that, but because I am in a position where I can flex, I choose to use that power for good whenever I can.
Did you take a look at Mark Mulligan and Medea's recent women in music study?
Yeah, it was a lot of, oh, yep, I already knew that. I don't know if it felt the same for you.
Yeah, yeah, no, and it's fascinating because like a lot of it does seem like the same things, and the percentages. It was a little disheartening because I think some of the percentages were pretty high, like that what 64% of survey respondents said that they deal with sexual harassment and objectification. 38% ageism, the lack of resources that feel designed for women, and perhaps people who are in the minority of the culture. It didn't, there wasn't really anything in there that made me feel like there was a lot of a lot of movement on these issues.
Yeah, right. There was one statistic that was up top that said that 90% of respondents felt that women were treated differently than men in the industry.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
have almost 100% on that question,
yeah,
that was a little higher than what I expected.
yeah, yeah. And I think I think putting these things out there, and then I'd love to have more information about that. What is the what's the breakdown of that? Because our industry now is such a blend of creators who are solely in the industry, trying to make it as an artist or songwriter in the world that they operate in, all the way in through music and technology, also really very male dominated. You know, I'd like to know what the breakdown is of that, and where people feel like they're treated differently.
Hmm. Yeah. Somebody did link to the study. That's great. I would highly encourage everyone to go take a look. If this is a new topic for you that you've not spent a lot of time thinking about, it's a really good overview and I think accurate representation of what women feel like operating within the music industry, specifically women who make music.
Yeah. And I think I think you know, the theme that we've had so much in this conversation is about setting an example and
Mhm.
using whatever platform and whatever voice that you have, even if it's small, even if it's in a room, even if you're in a room with 5 people and someone says something that you're not okay with, finding some way to raise that. And so, you know, and one of the statistics in here is, you know, there aren't very many, 81% of people said there aren't as many female role models for creators. And I feel like that's also something where, you know, we just have to keep tackling it, even if it seems really small and insignificant. It makes an aggregate difference.
It does, because it doesn't mean that there are 81% less people participating. They are out there, but you have to look at the constructs that take these people out of the conversations. So it was brought up before, who are the people that are booking the shows? Who are the people, promotion companies? Who are the writers at the magazines? Who are the editors that are signing out stories? The people that have the ability to book, to hire, to shine a spotlight, to invite people into the room, those need to be the people that spend the extra few minutes to go and look at how they are incorporating people from other walks of life, people that don't look like them, into the fabric of the thing that they're creating.
Yeah, it does come down to, I think, awareness and then personal responsibility. And,
Mhm.
you know, we all need really good male allies, and I have a ton of them. And, you know, we need to set examples, but we also need to not always be only women standing up for women.
I
And
really dislike that point of view when the onus is put upon the marginalized group, that bootstrapping mentality, or it's up to us to educate other people. I mean, bless my friends, because I've had some really honest conversations about this over the past year. One of my friends, Unique, who is a Black dancer, I went to her with some questions, and she was very frank in her response and said, you know what, it's not really up to me to educate you. I'm really tired. And if you want to go and research on your own, then that's on you. And I encourage you to do that. And it really made me turn a mirror on myself because I was telling that same thing to men that wanted to know about my experience as a woman in the industry. But then I was foisting that same thing onto my friends that came from other different marginalized groups, without even really thinking about it. And there's a lot of power in admitting when you are wrong, when you have things to learn, and how you can be a better, how you can take up space in a better way within your own community. And one way to do that is to not ask the people that are part of the marginalized group to bear the emotional labor of having to solve the problems that were not created by them.
right, right. Or to help, or to make someone understand. You can't make anyone understand. You know, someone has to be willing to open their eyes and listen and try to have some empathy. And you can shine a light on it, but
Mhm.
you can't, it's not, you know, it's not incumbent upon me to explain to someone else why you come up with a better product if you have diversity of opinions and viewpoints around the table.
Mhm.
So
Exactly.
what are you've got what is it, North Coast Festival in September, you've got a new role at Output. Tell me a little bit about what you're excited about coming up.
We are going to be launching a completely new editorial division at Output, which I can't say much about yet, but is the reason why I was brought on at the beginning of the year. And I'm really excited about seeing that space blossom because, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that's closest to my heart is demystifying music making and the music industry for everyone so that it is easy to understand and people feel empowered. And I hope that this space that we create serves as a centralized hub that solves those problems for a lot of folks. It would really feel like bringing every part of my life that I've been interested in into one little point. So I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about the idea of events coming back and being able to see folks IRL for the first time in 18 months. Yeah, those are probably the, oh, and of course, all of my work with the Academy. I'm on the ballot to be president for the Chicago chapter of the Recording Academy this year.
Oh, that's exciting. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
And talk about you know, in you know, an organization that has gone through quite a roller coaster
We
on.
always do.
Yeah, yeah.
um, I always have to be kind of careful about what I can say and what I can't say. I think that I can speak for my corner of music, for dance music within the Academy. There's a woman that was brought on to helm that division a few years ago, 2017. Her name is Shannon Herber, and she's done tremendous work in a very short period of time in revamping the authoritativeness of that genre within the Academy. I think people now look at the ballots for dance music in particular, and they finally feel like it represents the fabric of dance music as they know it. To see acts like Porter Robinson as Virtual Self and Sophie and Fisher and Jada G on the ballot for Best Dance Recording and Best Dance Album is a far cry from where we were 20 years ago with Who Let the Dogs Out. All right, like leaps and bounds. It's incredible. And it's really because, again, people in charge recognize that things need to change and they put forth the effort and the actions to make that happen. That's why I was tapped to be on the board for the Recording Academy in Chicago because dance music wasn't represented. They knew I was a loud voice that people paid attention to. And now this year we have Gene Ferris and Golf Clap running as for governor seats for my chapter, which is amazing. They're both dance artists that are persons of color. And we've frankly never had that before. So things are they're changing. They're slowly changing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it does have to be incremental change. And I think that, you know, we don't want to get into, I think, a trap that often happens around optics, and that we just want to make change so that the optics look better and that you don't really start from within. And I think that you know, the optics matter, but you have to really get to the point where there's motivation and that there's small incremental change, and that people who may be on the fence and are used to looking around a table and seeing others that look exactly like them, that they realize, okay, actually, you know, I get this now, and you know, it's a different world, a different era, and it's substantive.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm scrolling. There's a lot of chatter right now. Someone went off of a point that you made. Vickie's point is compelling to narrow-minded men. Having your market at the table creates more financial success. This automatically empowers women at all levels, even for the Neanderthal men, because women are worth billions in economic terms. I do agree with it. I hate that it has to be couched in that way, right? Like the fact that equality should make sense to someone only because they could stand to financially benefit is frankly gross to me. But if it works as a starting point before we get to altruism, then I suppose that's where we're at.
Yeah, exactly. And I increasingly see it, the US as a not even a democracy, a moneyocracy, and so we oftentimes can that's the first buy-in is people say, "Oh, will it be better for me economically?" Okay, that's the easiest way to buy in, but I'll take it. I'll take it in any way, shape, and form, really.
Indeed.
Uh, so let's see, any lessons that you've learned in the pandemic?
Mm. Um, I've really learned how to be gracious and listen. I've learned I've learned that I'm even through all of the devastating things that happened to me last year, there's a lot that people are really not aware of. I mean, not only did I have all of my gigs taken away from me, I was furloughed at Fox because I hosted that show, Future of Music, which brought in the most ad revenue for the company, and that ad revenue was sidelined, and that's how I wound up on the list.
Oh,
Which, yeah. Um, and then I wasn't brought back. Most of the furloughed people at Vox were not brought back, and then going through a period of uncertainty, interviewing with tons of companies, being told I was overqualified at major tech companies. And then my husband's mother's cancer came back, and we wound up dropping everything and going to move into her house and lived with her and took care of her for months until she passed away in November.
wow. Wow.
So
That's hard.
there's, yeah, it was and no one really knew that we were going through that. The entire time, people thought that it was business as usual. You never really know what is going on for someone underneath the veneer of whatever is posted on social media. You really don't. Um, I thought that I was an empathetic person before. I am a more empathetic person now. And then on a more functional or economic level, I have also uh, really learned how much understanding data and which flows to pay attention to and which ones can be ignored can impact successful outcomes. And when I say that, we have more than ever a million different outlets at our disposal. We have Twitch, we have Clubhouse, we have Snapchat, we have Instagram Live, we have Twitter, we have Facebook, and where do you choose to put your attention? Because you can't be everywhere at once. And learning about where my audience was and which platforms made the most sense for me to devote my time to because I understood the data helped me stay sane, honestly, because it showed me where to direct the most attention in order to have the most fruitful results.
That's great. That's great.
Data is
And
important.
data is important. And I also imagine you spent a lot of time with your cat who's named Crouton in the
Yes.
last year. So that
Yes, on Twitch, it's a joke that I made a redundant Twitch account so that my bot could actually be named Crouton Mod. So my mod on Twitch is my cat. And there are little redemptions on Twitch, like you can redeem crew coin, which is the money that you accumulate on my Twitch for things like MC Crouton, which is when I grab her and I get her to talk into the microphone, or people can redeem crew coin to have me give Crouton treats on screen. She's very much a part of my life in every aspect.
well, Dani, thank you so much. This has been really fun and inspiring, and I feel really productive to talk about all of these different issues that we face in your career. And Tom, thanks to you for hosting and putting the series together, which is just so wonderful.
Thank you for being a part of it, Vickie. Love having you in that host seat. And Dani, this has been remarkable. Thank you for sharing that very personal bit of information about you. This is what we strive for on this platform is to get a glimpse into the people beyond their business titles and things. So thank you for being so revealing about your personal life.
Of course.
You know, it's life happens. There's real shit going on everywhere, isn't there? And
Yes.
we've all been through it, and we will all continue to go through it. But just thank you both for being rock stars that I know you to be. To the audience, thank you for your attendance here. We have one more event. Believe it or not, Women's History Month ends tomorrow, but on Thursday we're sliding in one more featuring another one of my rock star women friends from the industry, Heather McBee. It's on April 1st, but nonetheless, we slid this one in at the last minute. So please dial in. It's the same time, 2 p.m. New York time. And with that, I just want to simply wrap up by saying be nice to each other, get a shot as fast as you can, and we hope to see you out and about sometime soon this year.
Have y'all gotten a vaccine yet?
I got my second one last week.
Congrats. I got my first one, my second scheduled for April 9th.
I feel great. I did not have any side effects, thank goodness. My wife felt like a dump truck ran over her for the second one for only about 36 hours.
That's what I've heard. Yeah, just about a day.
Yep. Drink plenty of fluids and take Tylenol.
All right. Noted. Will do.
All right, folks. Take care.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thanks so much.
Bye.